Welcome to this week's Rider Support.
This week we're going to show you how you can change your fitness in 6 months.
Anthony, okay, amazing question. First up we have Anthony. I've been getting coached by you for coming on 6 months now, and I just wanted to say how much the last 6 months have genuinely changed everything for me. Before we started to work together, I thought I had things figured out. I was riding loads, chasing numbers, smashing myself most days and going absolutely nowhere. Since I started working with you, everything's shifted, not just my fitness, but how I ride, recover, and actually enjoy the process again. I've been trying to convince a few club mates that proper coaching isn't just for pros and that what we're doing is way more than getting a training plan. Could you maybe talk through what you've changed for me, why it's worked? Because I think a lot of riders would benefit from hearing how simple changes done consistently can completely flip their progress.
Maybe don't read out the name on that.
I won't. Okay. And
I don't think you'd appreciate it. Yeah, I seen that question coming in. So yeah, I guess the premise is, can we lift the lid a little bit on what we've done differently with Mr. X in the last few months? It's been a total step change in the types of training. It's something I'm encouraging a lot of my athletes to do, and I think this is a good platform for maybe laying it out and showing people how the training they're doing at the moment is a little bit flawed. I think we've been lied to subtly but very consistently. Most recreational athletes are training like professional athletes, just less. They train less volume, less recovery, less support infrastructure, but with the same mindset. Optimize for power, optimize for critical power, FTP, durability, or insert whatever high performance metric you want there. But here's the problem with that. You're not a pro cyclist. And that's not an insult. You're just not, unless you're a pro listening to this, and then totally discard that. You don't earn your paycheck riding your bike. Training shouldn't be built around performance. It should be built around health, like long-term, resilient, robust health, because performance is downstream of health, not the other way around. When we start out optimizing for performance, we can miss health. When we start out optimizing for health, we still get performance as the byproduct. So it was a total paradigm shift. We went from chasing FTP to chasing health span. So we reframed the question entirely at the very beginning. Instead of how do I get faster in the next 6 months, it was how do I build a body that's still going strong 40 years from now? And that's the difference between health span and lifespan. One is just surviving, the other is thriving. Body, brain, bike, everything. Let's say you have, try and break this down. I'm trying to think of a realistic amount of hours. Say you have 11 hours a week for training. Now that's generous by most people's standards, but I'm really bad at maths, so you can figure it out for your own hours. Now we plug in the non-negotiables into our 11-hour training plan. The things that science is screaming at us that we can't but prioritize. The peer-reviewed data is so strong that you can't ignore it. So I'm talking strength training. You need to get 3 strength training sessions in per week. 45 minutes minimum effective dose, 3 times a week. We'll say that's 3 hours. Out of that, I think you should also peel away 1 hour for meal prep. So you don't have that excuse for the days to reach for the takeaway menu. You know, we've all heard the cliches, you're never going to out-train a bad diet. That's another hour gone. The research is so good on sauna use as well. It's maybe a separate podcast on changing white fat to brown fat, all the heat acclimation benefits, mitochondrial development. So 2 sauna sessions, 30 minutes each per week. That's another hour a week gone. Blue Zone research would show us that the connection to your community is really important. And I think I've emphasized that over and over again in the podcast, the group ride community. I think it's a good idea to do a group ride 3 hours per week as well. So that means we've 3 hours left to train. That's all we have left. We've 11 hours. So now the problem we were trying to solve for at the very start wasn't how do I distribute 11 hours of my training. The problem is much more concise than that. How do I use 3 hours effectively and distribute that time across my training zones to get the associated adaptation in each of those zones? We've largely ticked the zone 2 box with our 3-hour group ride, and the balance of that we're going to get in between intervals. So the big question becomes, how do I spend those last 3 hours to get a maximum return on my training investment? That's very much goal dependent. And that's when we dug into exactly what the specifics were for him. His were quite time trial focused. So I was able to reverse engineer the demands of the time trials he was going for. We spent a lot of time doing threshold stuff, sweet spot stuff. But you could be a criterium rider, you could be a Gran Fondo, a Sportif rider, a gravel rider, and how you distribute those 3 hours training time is going to totally change. Strength training, nutrition, heat exposure, community. These aren't side quests. These aren't afterthoughts. They are the sole mission. And when you get them right, the performance will take care of itself. You need to train like a human first and then train like an athlete second. And that's been the step change.
Yeah, it's a completely new approach, isn't it? And I'm just thinking about, you know, when these guys come into coaching with you and you're explaining to them, you know, that they have to not turn everything on its head, but this is new. This is totally different. You're not going to be spending those 11 allocated hours on the bike anymore because we have a different game plan. How hard do you find it to convince? Someone comes to you for coaching, they might be at their wit's end because, look, as this listener said, he was going absolutely nowhere. So he was at his wit's end trying to figure it out himself, right? So he comes to you, and is there a case where you're like, look, you have to trust me here? It's
not really, because it's like by the time they want coaching, like my job's not to convince you. I'm not a salesman. Like, you either want the coaching or you don't. So there's not too much of a buy-in. Also, maybe to caveat that, like if you're a Cat 1, Cat 2 rider, or you're on the way up a Cat 3, a Cat 4 rider, and you want to prioritize performance short term, there's definitely nothing wrong with that. But for the bulk of us who are north of 30, I think that should be the approach rather than performance-driven approach, at least in the long term.
Amazing. Okay, next question. Anthony, really simple question for you here. How do we make racing safer?
Really simple question. The most complex answer in the world.
I don't know if the answer is simple, yeah, but how do we do that?
I think we need to maybe move past exactly what this is likely to become a superficial treatment of the topic, and it needs to have longer form discussions around it. And when I say superficial, I don't even mean the length of time we're going to talk around, but it's been really a band-aid approach to safety with banning stuff like super tuck or turned in hoods or the puppy paws. Like, that's surface level. The real solutions, they're a mix of cultural shifts, smarter course design, better tech, and actual consequences for reckless rider behavior. Adam Hansen was on the podcast, was it last year? Yeah. And we talked about some of this stuff. CPA president. Yeah, president
of the CPA stands for...
it's
basically their governing body. They're kind of like their union. Association. Yes.
So it's Cyclist Professional Association or something. We're in an AI age. We talk about AI a lot internally and ways we're using it to smooth out workflows and improve innovation and drive product. Data on races that have the highest crash rates still isn't available. We can surely aggregate that. And then off the back of that, like a regulatory and penalty system for organisers that are consistently promoting dangerous races or having dangerous finishes. Inside that, then we can start to identify what are the causes of these crashes. Are they course design causes or are they rider causes? If they're rider causes, there needs to be real penalties. Yellow cards, red cards that hit the rider and that hit the team. Like, so we're looking at suspensions and fines, but also maybe deduction of World Tour points as everyone's clattering for this relegation battle. Because then you have an incentive from management to start saying to riders, be safe. There's real consequences to you not being safe. We might lose our World Tour license. Adam Hansen, I went back because I knew you were going to ask this question, and he had a couple of course design things which I think were really good. We seen it last year in Roubaix, the hot dog turn into the cobble section, downhill sprint finishes, Tour de Pologne, Groenewegen, disaster waiting to happen. More technical courses like the Vuelta, City Centre, or Team Time Trial are also a disaster because they reduce the rider decision-making time, and all the data that talks about reduced rider decision-making time, it always leads to bad outcomes. A really simple fix is give riders 2.5 to 3 seconds more decision time, say by repositioning barriers, marshals, warning signs, an extra 100 meters down the road rather than someone just waving a flag and then you have to react instant.
I think they actually did get better at that for the Tour de France last summer. They did make a point of putting a lot more visual flashing signs, as you said, way before the obstruction or the bend or, you know, the descent or whatever. So there has been a couple of kind of, I feel, token moves by some of the organisations to improve things.
Yeah, like I think that goes a little bit past token for me. There is a bit of substance to that one, at least, but it's just, it seems a bit piecemeal. Like, as one race does it. The stuff that's just seems nonsensical. Like, when you're out, I get you to share on the Hammerhead your live location with me, so I know where you are. If you're stopped for too long in one place, I know. Like, we had the Swiss junior rider who lost her life tragically and lay in the ditch undiscovered for a large section of time. Like, Garmin has live crash alerts on their devices, as does Hammerhead, Wahoo, all the leading bike computers. How have we not got live alerts going into the team cars or medical personnel if there's bad crashes? Likewise, the barrier design in some of these races is still so archaic. Like, the Tour de France is like flatter module barriers. Like, they don't catapult riders as much, but we don't see them everywhere. Some races still have the old school barriers with the legs hanging out. And then the race radio, which there's, you know, a move to get away from race radios, but there needs to be a safety channel on that's warning every team of upcoming stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think about the pushback that riders get sometimes? So they will, on a day with particularly bad weather or really bad conditions, kind of come together as in unity and kind of say, okay, we're not racing today, or we're going to decide that we're going to neutralise a certain area. They do get a lot of backlash, don't they, from the cycling fans, from the organisers, all of that kind of stuff. I mean, it's not really fair that these decisions, they feel like they have to take these decisions into their own hands, but they're obviously, it's self-preservation for them.
This is Tour Catalonia from Roglic trying to neutralise the stage you're talking about. It's probably not ideal that you have riders taking it into their own hands, but it's whatever system is going on internally, it seems like there has to be a massive overwhelming majority of riders before that ever happens.
Or somebody who's really powerful within the peloton, as in somebody who's kind of like
but
a
I don't have to get
veteran.
to ever act like unilaterally and only 6 of them want the stage cancelled, but because Roglic wants it cancelled, it gets cancelled. I haven't seen that happen. It's always been like Milan-San Remo where it's snowing, but the conditions have to be so bad for that to happen. It seems way past the threshold of... The challenge is we all want to see epic races. Entertaining. And crashing is entertaining. Bad conditions are entertaining. But how do you balance that like dichotomy of that's where the entertainment is with the real human side of that's somebody's son, somebody's husband, somebody's father, and they're real people with real consequences?
I think now we've talked about it a lot on the show, and I know you have with particular guests, that, you know, as young riders were going into the pro peloton or any peloton, that they had this sense of, you know, I really admire and you know, look up to this senior rider, and there's a hierarchy and you eventually climb that and you go up that. And I think, you know, there has been a change in that, whereas, you know, an older rider will now kind of get shoved out of the way by a younger rider, just like a little bit of a sea change in terms of respect. Yeah. But I think we're also seeing it as well, as in the younger riders are becoming a lot more outspoken after races. Like, we do see Remco Evenepoel coming out a lot of the time and saying, oh man, that was scary, that was shit. But
he's one of the best 6.
He's one of the best 6, but it is good to see them coming out. Unfortunately, it is half, you know, it's late, it's after the race, so I don't know. Look, we'll see what changes the organisers make over this season.
It's a good question though. We have 3 long-form podcasts every week. Some of them are 90 minutes or 2 hours long, and I realise you're busy. Sometimes it's hard to cut through the noise and figure out the signal, figure out what the important parts are of these conversations. So I've taken your feedback, and once a week I'm delivering to your inbox a newsletter called The Saturday Spin. It's a 4-minute read or less, and it's going to break down the very best thing I've learned on the podcast this week. So it's insights from the biggest names in the world tour, physiologists, sports psychologists and coaches. It's completely free to sign up to the newsletter. All you have to do is go to roadmancycling.com, stick in your email address, and once a week on a Saturday morning, I will deliver the Saturday Spin newsletter direct to your inbox. The link is down below. Go sign up.
Okay, next question. Anthony and Sarah, what happened to the GORE-TEX ShakeDry cycling jacket? I can't find it anywhere. What can I get now instead?
They were too good. They got discontinued.
Yeah, people weren't buying them enough.
They were too good. They kept you too dry.
They were keeping you too dry. They were too lightweight. They were too waterproof. They were too
jacket.
breathable.
Best jacket, maybe.
Yeah, although it's probably giving you skin cancer. I mean, or not skin cancer, cancer, and like genuinely changing your DNA internally, because those GORE-TEX ShakeDry was full of this chemical that we now know is very, very dangerous to the body. It causes fertility issues, testicular and kidney cancer, thyroid diseases. This is the PFAS, but it was really, really good at repelling water, like making sure stains didn't stick, made it very, very breathable. So they've decided to pull this particular piece of technology away from the outdoor apparel market. A lot of states, particularly in the US, have banned it completely, and I think that's essentially the rollout that's happening, completely moving away from this kind of GORE-TEX ShakeDry PFAS. There are loads of other alternatives out there now, because when the cycling industry and outdoor industry knew that this was going to happen, there was obviously a little bit of a rush to try and create other types of materials. None of them really as yet have stood up to the durability and performance of that particular kind of coating on the garments. So we still have a little bit of a way to go about. Definitely make sure that you're not buying any products with PFAS, because what's happened globally is there is a huge amount of stocks of these garments around, so you can still buy them on the market, you can still buy them on Amazon, eBay, everywhere. So please make sure you're not buying them. There's loads of other different types of, I mean, we have the GABA here, that's very, very safe, the Castelli GABA. You love that as well. I mean, it's not as breathable, I don't think.
More of a race jacket as well.
It's not the exact same, but there are loads of other garments that you can buy there. When you're going to buy, make sure that you're looking out for certifications. One to look out for is Blue Sign. The other one is GORE-TEX. That's just to make sure that the product is actually free from those harmful chemicals. So yeah, I think it's a good thing that these things have been phased out. What I will say, if you do have a few of these garments and you're a bit like, oh, how do I even dispose of this? Because if you put this into a landfill or you're trying to get rid of it, all of these chemicals will just seep into the ground. They're very, very harmful. So contact the company that you bought it from. A lot of them are doing a take back system at the moment. So cool. I'm afraid, listener, you will not be able to buy GORE-TEX ShakeDry cycling jacket anymore. So go have a look elsewhere. Okay, next question. Hi, Anthony. I feel like I get the most out of my sessions if I do them mid-morning. Sometimes if I have a hectic day with work or the kids, I have to push my session to either earlier or later. Do you know if this is something that other people experience, or if there is anything sciencey to back up this little fact I've discovered about myself?
We kind of discovered this in the gym as well, that we're stronger at certain times of the day than others, unaffected by our consumption of pre-workout caffeinated beverages.
The Celsius, I think we're developing a problem for Monster, yeah.
Your body runs on the circadian rhythm. That's like a 24-hour biological clock that affects everything from your core temperature to your hormone levels, to your coordination, to your reaction time. This rhythm tends to take the mid to late morning, roughly 9:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. as the sweet spot for many athletes. The reasons are core temperature. As your core temperature rises throughout the morning, so does your neuromuscular efficiency, your reaction time, your muscle elasticity. All of these make training feel a little bit easier and a little bit smoother. Also, your hormonal state. We all hear this word cortisol thrown around. It's that hormone. It spikes first thing in the morning. It's useful for getting us to wake up out of bed so we don't feel groggy all morning. That's why people say to delay your morning coffee to allow for that natural cortisol spike first and then have the caffeine hit, rather than having the caffeine and the cortisol hit at the same time. By mid-morning, it's starting to taper off, meaning you're starting to feel a little bit more balanced and less reactive. Testosterone is still elevated, supporting that strength and performance without overstimulation that cortisol brings as well. And the cognitive clarity is much sharper mid-morning. You don't get that mental fog as well. And there's plenty of scientific studies, and there's plenty of anecdotal reports show that athletes across multiple disciplines experience their best results and their best outputs in mid-morning or early afternoon. And I think I read somewhere that most world records are actually broken around that time as well.
So he's tracking normally, but there are definitely some people who prefer and feel like they are at their best not in mid-morning. I think the majority of people, I agree, are kind of mid-morning, or if you were to optimize for 60-70% of the population, they probably agree with this listener. But there are definitely people who will feel better in the evening or training super early. Apparently that is something
lifestyle dependent probably as well.
It's definitely to do with your chronotype, and chronotype is something that kind of it's the part of you that makes up whether you're naturally an early riser or you're slow to get going or you're a night owl, and that will have a big kind of impact on what time you get your best training at. I actually did a full podcast on chronotypes before, and if you can make yourself become a morning person, or if you're destined to be, you can train yourself a little bit better. Your body will always naturally try and slip back into being a little bit kind of tough to get out of bed, but if you create better habits around getting out of bed earlier, consistent bedtimes, no eating sugar before bed, all of that kind of stuff, you can kind of train your chronotype a little bit. But yeah, so it is interesting. I think that we watched a YouTube the other day, I think it was Mr. Universe, or what is that huge big bodybuilder, and he said that his absolute peak time to train is in the evening. So that to me would kind of say that he is a night owl, and that's all down to do with his chronotype.
Hey everybody, let's take a quick break to talk about the bike I'll be riding this season, Reap. I've been lucky enough to ride all the top brands in the world over the past few years, but these Reap bikes, they're not the same, and I'll tell you why. Reap is the first company I've seen that isn't chasing sales targets and the mass market. They're chasing something very rare: perfection. Every bike they make, it's crafted in the UK factory, and it's not about slapping a Made in Britain label on a bike from a Chinese factory. It's about control. From the first sketch to the final build, they're hands-on, ensuring that every detail is dialed in. That's very rare in an outsourced world of mass production. What sets them apart is innovation. While others pump out the same old designs, Reap's pushing boundaries. They're not following trends, they're setting trends. Think precision and performance, like an F1 car for the road. Absolutely no compromises. And it shows, and you can feel it when you ride the bikes. These bikes are built for riders who demand the best, whether they're chasing podiums or just want a machine that feels like an extension of your body, a piece of art. It's not hype, it's substance. Ride a Reap for yourself, and you're riding something crafted with intent. So if you're serious about cycling, check them out. It's reapbikes.com. I absolutely love my one, and I couldn't recommend it highly enough. Back to the show.
Okay, next question. Anthony, as a parent, how do you know when it's time to start taking your kids cycling seriously? He's just turned 17 and already talking about racing Category 4 next season. Should I be looking at coaching, or is it too early to go down that route?
I don't know how the category system works. It's very country dependent. If at 17 you go into junior only ranks, or if you don't have enough critical mass, maybe you're going into a shared junior Cat 4 ranking system, which they removed the gear restrictions, which makes that easier now. Before, because juniors used to be on restricted gears, very difficult for them to compete even with Cat 4s, but all that's aside because it's not really the question he's asked. At 17, if your kid is talking about racing Cat 4 and setting goals, definitely tells you a couple of things. He's super motivated for a 17-year-old kid, and he's already identifying as a cyclist rather than just somebody who, rides a bike, rides a bike to school or transport or recreation or whatever. He's given like a tacit green light to start taking things a little bit more seriously, but that doesn't mean he has to go full gas. What it means is starting to introduce some structure, some support around his training, and some semblance of consistency without stealing the fun and freedom and the reasons that he has fallen in love with it already. Like physiologically, 16 to 20, it's an important window because it's when athletes begin developing. Like you develop aerobic capacity, neuromuscular coordination, recovery habits, even racing instincts all start around that age. But emotionally, you're still, think back to 17, like you're figuring out who you are as a person. you're figuring out like what
Very
lights you
formative.
up. You're starting to see girls for the first time. You're maybe starting to experiment with alcohol for the first time. You're starting to figure out how you respond under pressure for the first time when exams start coming in. So the approach definitely should balance that structured coaching with the exploration and autonomy of being a growing small person that's trying to find their way to becoming. So I don't think I answered that question.
I don't
really,
think you said yes or no. I think
it's very individual, isn't it? Just depends, like balance, taking all that in and you, like trying to run your kid through that as a lens, as a filter to understand who he is and if it's suitable for him.
For me, and look, I don't have any kids, but you know, the way I would look at it is, yes, do you get a coach? Coaches are very passionate about it. Make sure it's the correct coach, as Anthony said, that they're not totally tunnel visioned and this has to become their entire life. And they're, you know, as you used to do, bringing spinach instead of popcorn to the cinema to cut weight. Do you know that the correct type of coach, and that really good coach will make sure that your kid is not getting burned out from this sport that hopefully he's 17 now, hopefully he's going to have another 50 years at, you know, longevity within the sport rather than burning really brightly and then, you know, that's it. His love of cycling is gone. So that would be my advice. Find a coach or a good group, a good, you know, club spin who he can learn from on like a more natural level for the next couple of, maybe next year or two, and then get a coach. What do you think?
I think that's a wrap. Roadman, thank you very much for tuning into the podcast. We've created an amazing community resource. There's a free tire pressure calculator. You can figure out exactly what you should eat for breakfast depending on your ride intensity, your weight, and the duration of your ride. All that's totally free in a community resource we're building. The link for that is just down below. Also, there's a video up here which I know you're going to love, and take a second to subscribe to the channel. See you next day.